Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, today we are going to discuss agents of social change. Firstly, we will try to understand the meaning of social change, process of social change, agency, and of course, agents of social change, various agents of social, how they do influence on the social change and what exactly the social change is. And for discussion on this very topic, we have in studio Dr. Manoj Jena. He teaches sociology in Jamia Millia Islamia University, and he has done a lot of work on contemporary sociology and published a number of papers in different national and international journals. Recently, a number of papers has also been published in peer-reviewed journals. And his specialization is technological area, media studies, and has got also published 2 textbooks. So I think his knowledge and experience will give us to understand this topic, social change and agents of social change. So on your behalf, I welcome him for EduSet lecture on this very topic. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much, Amarendra ji, for your kind word. And really, it's an immense pleasure for me to be here and deliver a lecture on social change, particularly the agents of social change. As you know that the social change itself is a very, very important component in our sociological studies. And in fact, many people, many sociologists, they are contributed immensely towards the growth and development of this particular concept, as well as they are in fact associated with this particular concept, and also they are trying to understand what kind of changes is happening in the social structure and social processes. Primarily, when we are talking about social change, we are essentially studying what kind of change is happening, or one can say it's what kind of structural transformation is happening in the society at large. And one can also argue that if you see the origin and development of this particular discipline, sociology, where many people, they are also trying to study the change aspect of our everyday life activities on one hand, the change aspect of different institutions, the change aspect of different organizations, so on and so forth. So even but the important event in the history, particularly the Industrial Revolution, and that was a very, very important departure point for sociologists. And in fact, people like Durkheim, people like Comte, people like Spencer, people like Marx, they have also analyzed all this change process. So broadly today in this lecture, I am going to talk about what are the component associated with the social change, with this particular process, social change, and how would you like to understand the idea of social change within our sociological literature. And again, we are also talking about what kind of factors in fact responsible for social change in particular. And the first component of my lecture, I'll discuss with you basically the understanding of social change in general. Then we'll discuss about different view, what we can say the sociological view. We have a linear view, we have a cyclic view, and the people like Comte, Spencer, all these people, they have contributed for this particular view, what we call the linear view. We have a cyclic view, the Pareto, and all these people, they have also contributed. I'll, in detail, I'll discuss with you. Then in the third component of my lecture, that would be on what are the agents, what we are talking about over here, or the specifically the factors, one can say, but the physical factor, the biological factor, then we have a ideology, we have a mass media, we have a communication system, we have a education, we have a planning, development, that sort of thing. We'll discuss it. Now let's discuss about the understanding of social change. And when we're talking about the social change always been a central concern of sociological study, as I have already talked about, and it's a social change, it's a kind of universal phenomena and characterizing all human society. It's purely, it's a what they call the universal phenomena. And change, social change is restructuring of social institutions, particularly culture, consciousness, technology, organization, settlement system, forms of exchange, structure of authority and decision making. These are the very, very important component. The culture, consciousness, this is a very, very important component in our study. Then again, one can also argue the social change itself is a complex and a significant to individual and society, and because it's also very significant, it's also very complex, because every other day some kind of addition is happening, some decaying, renewing, accommodating processes, evolving in other forms. Something is happening here and there, and it's happening around us and all over the world. So therefore, the change is, therefore we can say it's a complex and significant to the individual and society. And many, as I have already talked about, the many sociologists, they have also talked about this process. Particularly Ginsberg argues, and I quote, "The social change is a change in the social structure, that is, size of society and composition or balance of its part or type of its organization." That's the view from the Ginsberg. And then again, we can also say, according to Lindbergh, the social change refers to any modification in established patterns of interhuman relationship and standard of conduct. And he is also talking about that, that's one can say that's a modification, some sort of modification is happening. And one can also argue that social change can be defined as the change in social structure and social process. For sociologists, the social structure plays a very, very important role and important component, because we have one can say the social structure, as well as one can also say the social system. This, some sort of change is happening in the social system. And again, that the social change also includes the change in attitudes and change in value and norms, etc. That's some sort of some kind of value change, and one can say the beliefs pattern, value, norms, and this is also happening. This is also part of this change process. And as we know historically, that the entire world or the different countries have passed through the profound change in terms of institutional changes, a change in the class structure, economic changes, mores, values, and modes of living. The idea is that historically, if you see the starting from the nomadic period to again agrarian condition, or even tribal structure, in the tribal structure, or even you can see the modern industrial society, or even if you see the postmodern society, some sort of one can say some sort of structural transformation is also happening, in a sense that some kind of addition is happening, or some kind of deletion is also happening, owing to development of the different values, owing to development of the different norms, attitudes, so on and so forth. Again, the change in class structure, change in class structure is also very, very another important component in our sociological studies, because the entire debate, the Marxian debate, is all about class struggle, that we'll also discuss later, that class struggle, the change in class structure, whether it is a low haves and have-nots, or it's a lower class, middle class, or the higher class. It's all about different, some sort of is happening, movement from the feudal order to the capitalistic society or to socialism. It's a kind of all about some sort of one can say the change in class structure also plays a very, very important and vital role here. The economic structure is also another important component of our discussion, because economic, it's all about what kind of economy you have. It's a mixed economy, or it's a socialistic economy, or it's a capitalistic economy. It also plays a very important role in the process of social change. And the mores and values, and as well as the modes of living, we have a different pattern of the modes of living, and we have a different pattern of mores and values that we are also considering when we are trying to understand the idea of social change. Then, as I was also talking about the kind of institutional change, the institutional change is a change in all more definite structures, and such as forms of organizations, rules, and role content also. The more definite structural changes. For example, one can say the institutions, the family institutions or the marriage institutions, like the polygyny to monogamy. It's and again, we can say the monarchy to democracy, and we can also argue about the private enterprise to socialism, change from the dictatorship to the parliamentary democracy. This is for the one can also argue again and again that's a definite structures, change in the different structures and the forms of the organization. So here it's some sort of structural changes is also happening as well as the functional changes is also happening. One can say the change in the structure as well as the change in the function. For example, in the parliamentary democracy, because in fact the people are participating in many ways. For example, starting from the voting process to the decision making and the policy formulation, so on and so forth. Again, we are also talking about participatory democracy as well. In fact, we will also discuss about what are the legislations and what are the components in the participatory, what are the important agents or the factors which is responsible at bringing some kind of change in the society through the legislations. For example, 73rd and 74th Amendment in India, what we call the Panchayat Raj system, that we will also discuss about that. Then again, now let's talk about the people, the sociologists, those who have talked about on the social change, primarily the sociologist. Primarily Auguste Comte, Herbert Spencer, L.T. Hobhouse, and the Karl Marx. As I have already talked about earlier, that here we are, discussing about two kinds of views, or one can say is a perspective. One is the linear view or the cyclic view, and this is the broadly it's a well accepted view around the world in our sociological literature. And the linear view, where the people those who are associated with that, the Comte, Auguste Comte, to whom we are, he is one of the important figure in sociology, what you call the father of sociology, Auguste Comte, Herbert Spencer, L.T. Hobhouse, and Karl Marx. For Auguste Comte, he argues that the man's intellectual development is also responsible for bringing some sort of structural transformation in the society. One can that the intellectual development, the ideas is very, very important for us. When we are trying to understand, the ideas plays very, very important role. Even we have been witnessing this trend that the ideas plays very, very important role in the process of structural transformation or in the process of social change. So here, when he's talking about the intellectual development, he is also talking about law of three stages, which is very popularly well accepted paradigm, where he is arguing about the theological, metaphysical, and positive stage, and he is connecting this argument, these three stages, with the man's intellectual activities and intellectual development. In theological, he is talking about it's all about it's a primary stage, metaphysical it's little bit developed phase, and the positive, which is the most scientific stage, he is arguing. And in this way, he argues that through this process we can also understand what kind of changes is happening in the society. Then again, Herbert Spencer is the one of the prominent figure in our sociology literature, and he is emphasizing on evolutionary approach, that the systematic evolution is happening and we are evolving in a systematic manner. He was also in the contemporary Darwin's contemporary, and he is approaching that. His idea is cosmic evolution, when he argues that the universal movement from an infinite unstable homogeneity to definite stable heterogeneity. So he argues that through evolutionary approach one can also understand what kind of change is happening in the society. Then again, L.T. Hobhouse, who was strongly influenced by Comte and Spencer, because he is also part of this linear view. He was in fact influenced by Comte and Spencer. For him, and he argues the social change is that the development of the mind brings about the social development. In fact, he is also supporting Comte's view of social change, what is called the intellectual development, and again he is also talking about further that since this mental development includes a development of the moral ideas of rational ethics, which transforms the major social institutions, it can be regarded as progress. That means he's also connecting the idea of this process of social change with progress, and he's talking about moral ideas of rational ethics, which is bringing and which is facilitating some sort of development. When he argues, he's talked about social development, and this is a kind of progress process and progress developmental process. And again, for Marx, the Karl Marx is the most important figure in our sociological literature, and he is also talked about the process of social change. For him, the one is the most important factor is that, or the agent is that technology. In fact, we are also going to discuss about that extensively, and it's all about the development of the technology is another important component for him. And again, the relations between social class and what he's the entire literature where he's talking through his writing, whether it's a German ideology, whether it is a capitalist, talking about extensively the class struggle, the haves and have-nots in the society, and therefore the technology plays a very, very important role in the process of socialization, as well as the class conditions, class structure. Even if in the contemporary literature the class does play a very, very important role. Then, so therefore, according to according to the linear view, a number of significant cumulative changes in the human social history has happened. And when we are also talking about the growth of knowledge, which is facilitating for some sort of changes in the society, and increase or of scale of the complexity in the modern times, and growing movement towards the social and political equality. This is a kind of what the ideas they are putting before us is something, and some sort of changes is happening in the society. Then in the cyclic view, the people, those who are associated with that, like Vilfredo Pareto, Pithrim Sorokin, Arnold Toynbee, these are the very, very important figure in our sociology literature as well. So they have a very interesting and cyclic view, depict other aspects of human history. They are also trying to analyze the other aspects of the human history. In fact, they are extensively talking about this process of social change. For Pareto, what is argues in his work Mind and Society, presented his theory of circulation of elites and interpretation of the history, according to which the social change is brought about by struggle between the groups of the political power, and there are altering period of harsh rule by vigorous and newly victorious elite, and mild humanitarian rule by the declining elites. So the idea is that primarily he is talking about it's all about the power structure, the political power, the circulation of the elites. The power is moving from one parts of the one segment of the people or one group of people to other, and through that he is also trying to analyze this process of change. Sorokin, Pithrim Sorokin, in his work Social and Cultural Dynamics, is interestingly arguing about talking about three broad categories, and primarily he is focusing about the culture. He is talking that the first component for him is that ideational, the second is sensate, and the third is idealistic. The ideational is all about reality is spiritual. He's talking about spiritual. The sensate is the reality is material. The third is the idealistic, is a synthesis of two. So what he's talking about, every society is passing through these three phases: the ideational and sensate, as well as the idealistic. And he argues, and he suggested that the major civilizations evolved from the ideational to an idealistic, and eventually a sensate mentality. Each of these phases of cultural development not only seeks to describe the nature of reality, but also stipulates the nature of human needs and goals to be satisfied. So Sorokin, his interpretation in the contemporary Western civilization as a sensate civilization dedicated to a technological processes, and predicts its fall into decadency or the emergence of the new ideational or idealistic era. What primarily is talking about that we have, when we are trying to sorry, when we are trying to understand the idea of social change, here we are following three phases. Through that every society is passing through these three phases. Then again, Arnold Toynbee stresses the development and decay of all of major world civilization in the historical record. When he is trying to understand the idea of the changes and so on and so forth, he is talking about it's a decay of all the major world civilization, and Toynbee applies his model to each of these civilization, dealing with the stages through which they all pass: genesis, growth, time of turbulence, universal state, and disintegration. So definitely he basically argues that we are in fact passing through different stages. More or less he is also supporting the Pareto's view. He is talking about we have a time of troubles, we have a universal state and disintegration, and some sort of addition and deletion. What can say the something is some sort of addition is happening, something is decaying, something is disintegration is also happening. So he is also putting the argument in this way. So now after talking about this, let's talk about the agents of social change. What are the agents of social change? And in fact, when we are discussing about the agents of social change, we should always understand what kind of changes is taking place in structure. Though we have already discussed about the different cyclical view and the linear view, but nevertheless we have to understand what kind of changes is taking happening in the structure. One can say the structural changes is responsible in the process of social change. We have already talked about that, and even the change in structure is also linked with change in comprehensive standard, what called values. The values is also very important for us when we are trying to understand the social change. The value standards, comprehensive value standards, because as you know that the values are directly affected the content of social roles and social interactions, because the value is also based, for example, in the modern society we have a different kind of value system. In a traditional society we have a different kind of value system. Even in a medieval society they have a different kind of values, culture, and so on and so forth. So it's also through that value we are also playing different sort of roles. One can say the set of roles. We are also interacting with different people in different way. So for instance, the change of value in transition from feudal type of society to industrial commercial type of society. But one can also see the what kind of structure we had in the feudal society, what kind of structural transformation is happening in the industrial commercial type of society, and in that way the value is also changing simultaneously. We can also study how social structure and human relationships are always influenced by different internal and external agents and factors. So that sort of, one can say we have internal factors as well as the external factors. For example, if you see the family as a institutions, what are the internal factors affecting the family, or what are the external factors are affecting the family, and how the social system change in response to the changing conditions on which it depends. We have a social system, and we are also trying to understand the social system. We are also part of the social system. We are also trying to analyze that what kind of how the social system changes in response to the changing conditions, whether it is a physical conditions, whether it is a biological conditions, whether it is a cultural conditions, cultural factors, cultural agents, or technological conditions, so on and so forth. Because this is also affecting our relationship, this is also affecting our values, and through that we are also operating our social relationships. So broadly, when we are talking about the agents of social change, we have a multiple agents or multiple factors at the different conditions, and the multiple agents are and different conditions are responsible in the process of social change. For example, conditions and agent, like what you can argue that the physical environment can be a conditions, biological factor, the cultural agents, ideologies and ideas and ideology, technology, education, mass media, religion, social movement, development and planning. Broadly, one by one we are going to discuss about all these factors and agents. The physical environment, the physical environment, for example, geographical environment plays a very important role in our life. If you see the evolution of different environmental conditions, or the change of the environmental conditions also affect our social relationship, affects our social movements. It's also putting impact on our natural resources, so and so forth. The biological factors also plays a very important role, because the biological factor is also connected with the population structure, size, composition, so and so forth. The cultural one is also very, very important, because through that we are also trying to understand the process of assimilation, acculturation, and cultural innovations and the cultural conflict, and through the cultural process some sort of change is also happening. Ideas and ideologies, as I was talking about that, even the Comte is also arguing the evolution of ideas. The idea is evolving in a systematic manner. When the idea is evolving in a systematic manner, that's also putting impact on our social structure. The technology, another important, which is the most prominent and important factor in the process of social change. And again, education, then we have a mass media, when you call the communication revolution, religion, different sort of religion, we have a different types of religion, and the social movements, and development and planning. Let's discuss one by one. Then the agents in the sociological aspect of interpreting social change and in endeavoring to explain the relations to the main factors to the total human condition is an important component of our discussion, and permanent conditions of social change and interdependence of factors underlying the social change. This is also interconnected with each other. When we are trying to understand the biological factor or with the physical conditions, we have to interconnect we have to see what kind of interdependency they have. And all these agents or the factors, particularly like the environment, one can also machine, the physical and machine and technology, and it's a movement from simple to complex. When we're talking about machine, that the industrial simple to highly, in the simple society we have a simple technology, we have a simple machineries, and when we're moving towards complex industrial society, it's all about highly specialized machines and highly specialized work culture. And therefore, this is, one can say, interdependent with each other. So the simplicity, the simple society is all about simple process of what you call changes is happening. The complex society is in a complex form, some sort of changes is happening. So the environment component of what one can say, the physical environment, it's all about slow geographical changes, occasional drift, earthquake, flood, different extreme weather conditions in terms of the high and low temperature, humidity, etc. It's also putting impact on our social structure as well, and putting impact on us. Through that, some sort of structural transformation is also happening. Some sort of changes is also happening. All these physical changes affect adaptation process, and it is evident that the physical changes putting direct and indirect impact on social cultural process of human life, because the human being is absolutely connected with the nature and is absolutely connected with the physical environment. If something is, some sort of changes is happening in that physical environment, that is definitely putting impact on our social cultural processes as well as the economic processes. For example, the rain, the rainfall is also, as you know, that the amount of rainfall is also putting impact on our harvesting system, or in the agricultural productivity. In that way, we are absolutely connected with us. If there is no water, there's some sort of drought is happening, some sort of chaos and huge agricultural, the people, they are not getting enough agricultural resources. So in that way, we are interconnected with each other, because the nature, we have a very strong sense of connections with the nature and as well as the physical environment. And then again, the biological agents. The biological agents and the biological conditions and agents are another source of facilitator for the social change. And one can say the social continuity and perpetuation, growth and decline of population, this is another important factor. And the biological conditions change and prepare the way for social change, like the hereditary processes and like the population growth. And one can also further argue the biological processes, that determines the number, the composition, the selection and hereditary quality of the successive generations. And as well as these processes may themselves be set in motion by the social attitudes, interest as the later control of sex relations, marriage, racial intermixtures, the size of the family and so forth. So, in a sense, one can also argue that the biological processes that determines the number, quality, composition, selections, so on and so forth, as well as the different kind of size of the family structure. In the more at least we are here talking about the population structure, the biological component with that, and this is also plays a very important role. As you know that the rise of population, if the number is increasing, that is also putting impact on our natural resources. Maybe there is a scarcity of natural resources and the people, they are not getting enough resources to fulfill their basic needs, or there is a struggle or fight to acquire some sort of resources. So, this is also facilitating this process of social change. And this biological process is also connected with the fertility process as well as the mortality, fertility, fecundity is linked with the social determined conditions. In the rate of the fertility or the mortality conditions is also connected with the process of social change. And the social arrangements such as taboos and intermarriage restrictions, so on and so forth. Then the changing in population changes occur through migration, invasion, war, changing food supply or changing mores, because the population structure is absolutely connected with the biological conditions and as well as the environmental conditions. And the birth rate, death rate also determine the biological and sociological factor, which is further facilitate change in the structure and process. As I have already talked about the heredity, different kind of and mutation emergence of a new species, and suddenly that is also catalyze some sort of change in the society. So the population changes is occurring through the migration. One can also further argue that through the migration we have a number of factors is responsible for migration. We have a push factor or we have a pull factor. And the people are migrating from one place to other, where there is a number of resources as available, and they are living a particular place where there is no enough resources is available. This is a bigger issue in our Indian context. Every other day we are visualizing some sort of debate and discussion on that, why the people are migrating rural India to the urban India. This is a kind of debate, and through that process some sort of change, structural transformation and some sort of change is also happening. For instance, the Delhi, people are saying that Delhi is highly populated. The people, they are migrating from different parts of the India, whether it is the North India, whether it is other parts of the East India, whether it is the South India, so and so forth. And through that, there is a number of problems is also happening, whether it is a housing problem, whether it is a scarcity of water, and also policy issues. These are the factors is putting impact on our larger social structure. And we can also see what kind of structural transformation or social change is happening through this process. And again, change in the balance of birth and death is the precondition for the social change, because as you know that through our census that the sex ratio is also plays a very, very important role, because the balancing the sex ratio in between the men and women is also important, and this is also through that and some sort of change is also happening, and therefore the size and composition of the population are intimately related through the social change process. This is an important indicator for, so one can say, the social development indicators. So therefore, these are the agents of these are the factors facilitating some sort of social change. Again, another agents of social change, what we call the cultural agents or factors, they are also absolutely responsible for social change. The cultural factors, including, as you know, that when I am talking about cultural factor, this is all about art, philosophy, rules of social organization, and including any branch of culture. So that means, we are encompassing everything, over here when I am talking about cultural factors. So the first important cultural factor is the cultural innovation. That the cultural innovation, it's all one can say it's a ideas in the evolving, some innovative ideas that also facilitating some sort of change in the society. One can also say in the innovations in the West or innovation in the East is also in fact putting impact on our social structure. Then second, the cultural contact. Cultural contact is that some people, they are connected with each other, whether in the through the process of diffusion or whether through the process of cultural borrowing. For example, one can say the people are migrating from one parts of the world to the other parts of the world. When they are migrating, they are also migrating with cultural values, norms and ideas. When they are leaving a particular area, they are coming with the knowledge of that particular area. When they are joining another culture, they are adding that ideas and the cultural values to that culture. So that means some sort of cultural contact is happening, whether it is happening through diffusion, whether it is happening cultural borrowing, so and so forth. And this, the cultural diffusion and cultural borrowing is also plays a very, very important role in the process of socialization. Because in many sociologists, they have extensively discussed about the idea of the diffusion, how the diffusion is happening, which way the ideas diffused from one part of the world to other. Then again, new combination of innovations. We can also say that the hybridization, some sort of hybridization, addition, the one idea is added with another kind of ideas, and through that, new processes emerging, and we are also visualizing some sort of change in the society. And again, another value with this, the cultural factor is the pluralism. Providing equal opportunity to everybody, providing equal space to every culture. That's the value of pluralism. And this value, we Indians, we are always adapted all the great values, particularly the pluralism, and particularly giving respect to all the religions, giving respect to all the cultures, so and so forth. So that means the pluralism can be interesting component to understand the social change. And the another important cultural component is that the interstructural autonomy facilitate the initial process of cultural modernization. The cultural modernization is a kind of concept where you will have a interstructural autonomy. You will allow everybody to grow simultaneously. They will have enough autonomy. That's the new form of cultural modernization. And what we call say the modern values, what we call the scientific values. And you blindly you are not accepting anything. You are questioning the very existence of that reality. You are questioning the truth. And the modern values also plays a very important role. Then the cultural traits, the different cultural traits and different cultural elements, they are migrating different parts of the world, or there are some sort of hybridization is happening, or whether it is acculturation is happening. We will also discuss about that. These are the cultural traits, they are also plays a very important role. And again, the cultural communication, the communication in between different cultures. That means you have to have a very clear cut and systematic communication with different cultures. So through that you will borrow different ideas, you will add some ideas, and you will utilize some sort of new ideas. This is called the cultural communication, which is an important component agent of social change. Then again, another agents we have what we call the acculturation. Acculturation is a very, very important process in cultural studies. The acculturation means the whole way of life is in process of change under the influence of another culture. When some people, they are migrating some parts of the world, when they are coming to a particular culture, they are also coming with their culture, and that particular culture is putting impact on the local culture, and that means the local culture is influenced by the foreign culture. In a sense, that means that some people, they are adopting systematically, they are adopting that culture. That's called the process of acculturation. And the transculturation is that when there is a exchange of the cultural trait and complex. That means one can also say this is a kind of cultural communication, that you are some sort of cultural cultural exchange is happening in terms of the trait, complexes, so and so forth. And cultural pluralism is that you are allowing all cultures to live simultaneously, and the cultural assimilation is the end product of acculturation, where some cultural contact is happening, then you are accepting that culture. Through the acculturation process, we are adopting that culture, and so the end of the day, some sort of cultural assimilation is happening. In Indian culture, you can view the Indian culture through this process. When many people they came to this country, they stayed over here, they came with their culture, they added their culture with this Indian culture. If you want to view the pan-Indian culture, it's also all about the cultural assimilation of many cultures. Then particularly Wogban, W.F. Wogban, he is the important figure in study of social change. In his work, after discussing the conception of social evolution and examining the detailed role of biological and cultural factors in social change, Wogban argues and made a distinction between material and non-material culture, and he argues about the cultural lag. Material culture do not synchronize exactly with the change in the material culture, and thus sources of stress and conflict is happening. So here he is arguing the idea of, he is talking about the idea of the cultural lag. He argues that we are unable to create some sort of unable to create, or we are unable to synchronize the material culture as well as the non-material culture. The material culture would be the technology, or non-material culture would be the value. That means we can see that there is a gap with that. So that thing is creating a kind of stress and conflict. Through this thing, we can also see some sort of changes is also happening. That means even if the people they are using highly, for instance, even the people they are using highly sophisticated technology, but still they are practicing the very orthodox values. They are practicing very orthodox values. They are practicing very orthodox rituals. So that means he argues that there is a lag in between the material culture as well as the non-material culture. So this is another important distinction he has made. Then another agent, which is the most important agent as we called now, because the technology and one we can say the science and technology played a very, very important and vital role to reshaping our social life in one hand, as well as bringing some sort of structural changes in the society. In the beginning of my lecture, I was in fact talking about briefly the Industrial Revolution, that if you see in the 16th, 17th and starting from the 15th, 16th and 17th century, that the commercial revolution or the scientific revolution or the industrialization absolutely changed the entire social life in Europe. So therefore always we are analyzing technology can be important determinant, and in fact it is an important determinant to study the social change. And primarily the technology is precipitating great changes which would overturn old customs and institutions. Definitely some sort of shift, one can say paradigm shift is also happening, and therefore we are also analyzing how the technology facilitating multiple effects. That means it's not a some sort of a single effect is happening. One can say it's a multiple effect is also happening through this the process of technology or utilization of technology. And for instance steam engine, that the steam engine, particularly steam engine, that has also precipitated and it has also provided new opportunities. It has opened off new vistas in European society, and that has also, it was a kind of multiple impact in the European society. Telephone, that is a kind of one can say communication revolution which has happened owing to the evolution of or the invention of telephone. Automobiles, which is as you know that in the contemporary society the mobile phone and the automobiles that they embedded in inhabited machines, what the Uri is also talking about. Then the telegraph, and now the present day internet. These are the technological development and technological inventions, and these are, and all these agents, all these factors putting a very intrinsic impact on our social structure, and one can say some sort of absolutely it's a it's a paradigm shift has occurred in many ways. We can see in our social life, we can see our economic life, we can see our political life, so on and so forth. Then again we have other agents like the conflict. The conflict can be an important determinant, can be important component to study the social change. Conflict within the structure, the conflict outside the structure, conflict within the system, or conflict within the subsystem. So primarily we can say the religious conflict, caste conflict, gender conflict, regionalism, majority versus minority. We can also see the education, values, modern values versus traditional values, because the consensus as well as the conflict is another component, or one can say it's an agent in the process of social change. Because maintaining a order, or whether you are trying to maintain an order, or whether you are trying to creating you are also trying to analyze the conflict, which is very important in sociological literature. Because religious conflict is in the present day India, or in the global scenario, the religious conflict is a very important vital component. We can also see that through that process some sort of structural transformation is happening. You see the geopolitical scenario or the religious conflict within the country, so on and so forth. Then the caste conflict, another important, in Indian context, as you know that we have a very we have a caste system where the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra are there, and in fact we have a very interesting hierarchical structure, and that the caste conflict also facilitates some sort of in the process of social change, where we are also talking about utilization of resources and division in between different groups. Some are haves and have-nots they are also equally not, the knowledge is not equally distributed among everybody, the resources is also not distributed among everybody, so and so forth. Then again the gender conflict is also another important component. The gender conflict is a role of men and women in the society, and you can also understand the idea of the patriarchy, so and so forth. And regionalism is also another important process or important component in our social, so in the study of social change, because that's now in India we can also see that the regional identity also plays a very important role in our political life, in our social life, in our economic life, and they are the regional identity, they are using the regional identity as a kind of pressure group to they are demanding some sort of they want some sort of benefit and for that particular region. And the issue of majority and minority, which is another important component even in India as well as in other parts of the world, many times the people are arguing some section of the society they are getting some more benefits, and some of them they are not in fact part of the developmental processes. So the idea of the minority, whether it is a religious minority, whether it is a linguistic minority, whether it is a ethnic minority, they are always asserting their right. They are also arguing about their right, they're talking about they want a share in the developmental process. So therefore, the government of India, even the different other government in different parts of the world, they are also concerned about the minorities, they are also concerned about other other groups in the society like the Dalits, tribals, women, disabilities, so on and so forth. All these components that they can be all these agents that's also facilitating or bringing some sort of change in the society. Then again, education can be a important determinant, and in fact it is a important component in our studies. Education means literacy, providing education to everybody. The literacy mission is also very important, because we have to educate everybody. In an Indian context, till now roughly roughly 70% people, they are literate, or even less than that. Exactly, I don't have a data with me, but I am talking about the rough figure. But again, it's our responsibility as a democratic nation to educate everybody, because the education will facilitate in many changes in the society. And the modern values, adoption of the modern values, and adoption of the scientific temper and scientific values, rationality, and this is also plays a very, very important. Rationality in the sense questioning the truth, questioning the reality again and again. You have to verify the reality. You have to you have to understand the reality in a rational manner. So the scientific temper is also another important component of our social studies. And the mobility can be another important aspect of our social study, social change. Is that something, what kind of mobility is happening? Because always we are, when we are talking about caste system, and there we are also arguing whether it is a vertical mobility is happening, or what is a horizontal mobility is happening, or as you know that caste is a closed group, where birth, whatever status you are getting, whatever identities you are getting according to your birth, and you don't have that sort of openness like the class system. In a class system, you can also climb the ladder. If you are accumulating some sort of resources, you can get some kind of mobility. But nevertheless, we in the caste structure, we are also viewing it's a kind of mobility. It's a some kind of vertical mobility is also happening, and some sort of horizontal mobility is also happening. Vertical in the sense that somebody is accumulated, if a lower caste person is accumulated some sort of education, or learned man is achieving some kind of social position, some sort of vertical mobility is happening. And in the horizontal mobility is that it's not some no positional change is happening, that's moving from one place to other. Then again, another important aspect of that is the social movements. So you can also view or also see the social movement. The social movement primarily or basically is that collective attempt to bring about change, and for that social movement we are also talking about ideology, organization, and collective mobilization. These are the three important component or important aspects of social movements. On the basis of the ideology, on the basis of the ideology, we can also differentiate or divide the kind of social movement, whether it is a reform, a revolutionary, resistance movement, so and so forth. That means the ideology also plays a very important role in the process of social change, and organizational structure and collective mobilization. These are the very important component of through the process of social change. Whether you are reforming like the Brahma Samaj and Prathana Samaj, they were talking about reforming society. Whether it is a revolutionary one, you want to brought some kind of structural changes in the society, or one can the Pierre Bourdieu says a structuring structure, and in that way, or resistance movement, or you have a resistance movement, all the developmental movement in this developmental activities, or one can say the resistance movement view in different parts of the tribal India. And again, we have the idea of the relative deprivation, and to understand the changes what is happening. Relative deprivation means that some people, they are not getting some kind of benefit, and some people are getting better benefit if you compare with the early one. That's the unequal distribution of wealth, unequal distribution of resources, and that's the people are analyzing that they are also deprived from this developmental activities, they are deprived from the political processes, they are deprived from economic process, they are deprived from the educational processes, so on and so forth. Through that, some sort of structural strain is happening, and that deprivation in fact putting impact on our social structure, and then the people, they are mobilized, they are trying to mobilize themselves, and they are forming an organization, and they are establishing the ideology that we are not even better treated in this country, or in other parts of the world, we are not getting enough opportunities everywhere. So through that, some sort of different kind of movement is happening, like within the structure. So these are the very important component of in the change process. If you see in India in particular, starting from the women movement, starting from the environmental movements, starting from the Dalit movements, tribal movements, on even the different new science movements, so on and so forth. These are absolutely, all these movements, they are facilitating. It's a kind of, one can say, it's a facilitating factors for social change. Then again, the last component of our discussion is that development planning and change, because in a democratic country like India, always we have a different kind of planning, planning in a sense that we are formulating some sort of planning to fulfill certain targets in the society, because we have some sort of responsibility towards the larger society. Because whether it is a 5th-year planning, if you see after independence, the government, many governments, they have formed different kind of, they have formulated different planning from developmental process. Initially industrialization process was a kind of planning process, then again education, and then again providing equal opportunities and talking about scientific activities, so on and so forth. So planning is in fact is a important component for social change. For example, literacy mission, you have to have a planning to eradicate illiteracy in the society. Through that process, you have to use the state machinery, you have to adopt different kind of planning process to educate them, right? So this is a kind of planning process for change. And for social cultural development, like for example, population, someone wants to check the population growth. And again, if you want to have a comprehensive developmental activities for all sections of the society, to providing safe drinking water, electricity, housing facilities, you have to have some sort of plan mechanism for that. So therefore, the planning for social cultural development, that will bring some sort of, one can say, the positive change in the society. And we have a rural development plan, as you know that roughly more than 75% of the people, they are living in the rural India. One has to introduce a specific targeted plan for rural people, and one should also see that what kind, in which context, what kind of plan is necessary. For example, in the country like India, it's a diverse culture, diverse region, and diverse different kind of people. So you have to have a different kind of planning from different people in different regions. Then you have a urban planning also. Urban, nowadays we are viewing urban planning is a very important for bringing some sort of development. And in fact, the idea of the development it's all there. In many planning documents in government of India. The community development program, it was also part of what you call after independence, we had an interesting agenda to for the community development activities. We have also some sort of, when we are talking about legislations, and legislations also plays a very important role, different kind of legislations, and we can also talking about democratic decentralization, Panchayat Raj, the 73rd and 74th amendment, it is a kind of, plays a very important and vital role to bringing or taking the democracy in the grassroots level. Now we have a educational planning, and we have a economic planning, and we have a equity, and we are also always utilizing different kind of planning for developmental activities. Nowadays we are also talking about sustainable developmental activities. These are the very important factors and important component in the process of social change. Yeah.
Okay, so well friends, we try to understand the social change. It says that there are different agents, different agencies. We talked about briefly we can't explain in detail each of the agency, but just we want to communicate you how you just look at the agents of social change and make your own view. And for further reading, you just we will suggest some books also in another lectures. So I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on behalf I thank Dr. Manoj Jaina for giving such a wonderful lecture on this very topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.